Hey guys, and welcome back to another Trekyards podcast. As always, I'm Captain Foley.
I'm Connor Cookins, and we are here yet again, another week, another podcast. Cool.
It is indeed. And I think we want to talk about Discovery. There's been a lot of talk lately about the new Klingons. Even ourselves, we put up a video about it. And it's an interesting topic, but it really begs the question, is the new Discovery series, in fact, a reboot? Not Kelvin Timeline. Don't get too confused, but a reboot of the series. So
that is a massively huge question, Stuart, to ask. And I think it's fair to say we have been of the opinion no, until this Klingon picture, and then we both sort of absorbed it, and I think we both messaged each other saying we should discuss this as a topic.
Yes.
Which I think says something, because we've been pretty pro Discovery, seeing what they can do, and so to ask this question, is a pretty radical one. So Stuart, why do we think it could be a reboot, and what do we mean by reboot in this sense?
Well, we know they've established it's in the prime timeline.
Yes.
Which, from what we've seen, doesn't fit. The Klingons, if they are Klingons, they could be totally different alien species. We don't know. But
again, it was said by the actor that they're Klingons, then redacted, but that's likely just CBS action. So let's assume for a moment that they are Klingons. More likely than not, yeah.
And they have to shoehorn them in between Enterprise and TOS.
Yes.
And still have them make sense in the Prime universe with everything we've seen.
Yes.
The redesigned costumes, the redesigned skulls, even the ships, the sarcophagus ship, and the other Klingon ships we've kind of got a glimpse of, don't say Klingon at all. I mean, slightly, a little bit with the armor and stuff. I can see it, but it's a reimagining of what. Therefore, it's a reboot. Even the uniforms for the Starfleet uniforms, look very much like the Kelvin Timeline, which was a reboot. So it looks like they're kind of doing the same thing here, and I don't know. What are your takes?
Not to mention the new wireframe ship, which looks very post TNG. The Alpha Discovery design, which again has some pre-TOS tropes, there's some post-TOS tropes, a confusing mix of the two. It's when you put all these things together, it doesn't say prime timeline. It really doesn't, and that's interesting. Now, one thing that I considered, so in the past, and I'm referring to Into Darkness, the people behind Star Trek can lie to the people. They said it's not Khan. So that was a lie as to still give people the surprise. So there's a possibility they're just lying to us about being primes, that we are still excited. I would rather think that's not the case, but there is a possibility of that. What I think is more likely is that there's this subtlety. It's still prime timeline, but a reimagined prime timeline. By that I mean the events of the prime timeline still happened. So it's the universe we know in terms of, Zefram Cochrane and the Enterprise and all these characters. Everything we know exists as we know it, but they've rebooted the look completely, or reimagined. So it's our universe, but an alternate version of our universe which just looks modern. Which is an interesting distinction. It's prime, but it's not prime. Now, how do you feel about that, Stuart? Because that's the only way I can see them telling the truth on that.
I'm not happy about it. I mean, Enterprise was the same thing. They made it look new and different and updated, but still kept very true to the prime timeline aspects. So they don't have to mess with things like they have if that's the case. I think they've stepped way too far out of the box on a lot of different things. But then again, we don't even know half the story. We know like 1/8 of the story, if that, as to what's going on. All this could be explained with a time travel story or some kind of alternate reality or history or just something that happens in the first few episodes that doesn't encompass the entire series.
Yeah.
I mean, it can all be explained away. So.
Or it's a whole dream.
There you go.
Old trope.
There you go. So yeah, I'm hopeful still, but at the same time, I think they've really.
What do you think of my use of the word prime, and how they can still say it's prime? Like, what do you think of my justification there? Do you think that's a possibility and makes sense?
Yeah, it's definitely a possibility. I don't know if that's the way they'd be thinking, though. I don't know.
But otherwise, how can you call it Prime?
Well, they called at the beginning of the JJ 2009 movie Prime timeline as well, but then later retconned it and saying, oh, well, it's an alternate before the Narada went through.
Yeah,
that's your way of covering your asses.
Well, yeah, there's both theories on that. Unfortunately, it's not 100% clear. I as I've said very, very early on, if they want to reboot the look, that's fine. It's a parallel universe. Tell us that, because then we can go into it with none of the baggage except the ideas of Trek and the want to see these characters in a new form. You lose all of the other baggage. When you say the word Prime, like Star Trek Online is Prime timeline, and they've taken a lot of care to make everything fit. I mean, it's amazing how well even the new TOS ships. Wonderful job, guys. I mean, you keep hitting the ground running with every new expansion. It's amazing.
Yeah.
When you put the word Prime on, you have a lot of responsibility. You have, as I've said twice, I think this week, a tapestry, and to then go into the middle of it, cut it, and then bring in this, leather into this lovely tapestry, put it in the middle, re-sew it in, and say, hey, it's Prime. And everyone looks at it and says, why is it shiny, brown, and look different? And they're like, it's because 2017. And we're like, no, I get that, but why is it looking the way it does? And they say, because we want to make it look better. And we say, but it looks stupid when compared to everything else. And you're lazy for doing it. It's an odd analogy, I know, but it's a responsibility when you call it Prime. Yeah. That's why I said for J.J. Abrams, if they had just said, start parallel universe, how many problems would we have not had with it? We'd have lost so many hours of talking about it because of how easy it would have been to talk about.
Yeah, and they haven't gone ahead and said that. They haven't said that this is a rebooted timeline, this is a different timeline. All we've heard from them is that it's Prime timeline, which, from a Trekkie's point of view, or Trekker, whatever you want to call yourself, it creates a vision in your mind of what it should be, especially when you've been with Star Trek for a long time and you're even a fan of TOS and whatnot. It really puts that era into perspective on what you expect and what you want to see and what you should be seeing. Mm-hmm. We really shouldn't have to explain it to anybody. They should know. Mm-hmm. They are fans. Well, they should be fans of the show as well. They should know what we expect and what to do.
And there's reason there's message boards and there's shows like ours and there's this massive fandom. There isn't this fandom for BSG, for Farscape, for Stargate. There is for Star Wars, but it's a different animal. This is one of those franchises that has this life behind it. It took on a life of its own. There's a reason that something about the 1960s show got so many fans to keep it going. The fans who watched the show, who were passionate enough, who were absorbed by this, whatever it was, they got the producer, they got them to sign another millions of dollars to make another season, and because of that love, they got an animated show, they got a movie, they got more movies, they got another spin-off, they got all of this fan love. The reason there is the Star Trek franchise is because the fans have been there for it and have passionately loved it, and people are very much alive that were alive in the 60s. Those people are not old. My dad watched it in first run in the UK. Doug Drexler first run in the US. So these people who have the entire span of Trek knowledge are around, and here you are saying, but your vision that you've known for 50 years, half a century, they have known the way it was. They're saying, but actually
we're just gonna stomp on that and do it our way. I mean, I personally say they did that a little bit with Enterprise, but I can see that you can even see that they held a little truer to what things should be, and they did explain everything that they kind of changed.
I mean, obviously you had your in between canon, which then got uncanonized or whatever. For me, I always saw Enterprise as, I mean, it flows. I mean, that you can see the direction they're going, and while yes, technology improved there to make things look more advanced. I mean, in terms of a spiritual success, a prequel, I thought it was done masterfully. You know, it wasn't a great show. That's that's a separate question. But in terms of how they tried to bring everything in, obviously it got better and better, and then until season 4, where guess what, we get an episode in the Mirror Universe with
Yes.
we get the mirror. I was about to argue, okay, well, somebody once said a theory that whereby the Constitution, the TOS style, is actually as if somebody is remembering it. It's just a vision of the future at the time, and therefore you can say, but it's just a perspective on that era, and therefore you can sort of change it. But my thought on that is that fine, okay, but in TNG we see the same bridge. In DS9 we see the same sets. In Enterprise we see the same sets. In 3 different iterations of the show we have double confirmed this is how the timeline looked. So you can't say that's not how it looked in the past, because we double, triple, quadruple confirm it. People always go back to it. So that is how that era looked, which is 10 years. This is 10 years before that.
Yeah, and because of all that, it does give me the bad impression that this is looking very much like a reboot.
Okay, well I'm definitely getting that feeling too. But how do you feel about that as itself? About Star Trek Discovery is a rebooted Star Trek show, just like the motion picture was a rebooted.
Yeah,
everything was rebooted except the characters. How do you feel if we just say boom, yes, reboot? How do you feel, and then the direction they're taking it?
As long as they tell us that going into it, that it's going to be rebooted, fine. I don't have a problem with a new look and a new take on the universe I know and love. I mean, JJ did it. Whether he did a great job is debatable by some people. I mean, it's kind of growing on me. There's a lot of issues with it, but I want to know that going into it, that yes, we're just taking the Star Trek you love and we're just changing it. It's going to be the same characters, the same races, the same whatever, but it's not going to. We're not going to try to shoehorn it in between these 2 series, which is the problem I had with them doing a prequel. I didn't want to see, more of what we've seen over the years. We don't need that. I would have preferred that they do one after Voyager, post Voyager, so that we can kind of move on, as it were.
We can follow the universe as it evolves.
Yes, and the problem you have with prequels is you restrict yourself greatly as to what you can do, unless you're willing to piss a lot of people off. I guess is what I'm trying to say.
But then why pick that era?
Exactly. Like you really restrict what you can do with the characters, the timeline, the stories, the political environment, everything, because it's all been established before.
Right, okay, so there was a production meeting at one point where they're at CBS and they say, right, new Trek show, what do we do? And someone says, ooh, let's go pre-TOS because we have TOS recognition. Oh, there's tensions to Cold War the Klingon. Let's use that. And then someone else said, okay, let's do that, but make everything look different. And the first person says, oh, but why do we pick the era then? Oh, because then why don't you just do post TNG? So there's another Cold War. I mean, you can do any, if you want to pick that era for the reasons of the context, you've got to respect the time.
Yes.
You can do everything after, just do it after then, and you can make your own context or parallel universe, or which they might well be doing. It just seems odd that I feel like if they've specifically chosen to explore this part of the universe, which is great, awesome.
You need to know, and the most important thing is you need to know your fan base. And I think one of the discussions that could have come up during that meeting, as you said, was, well, there's a lot of people that love TOS. They love the original series,
Star Trek continues to prove that.
Yeah, Enterprise didn't get a chance to really grow like we wanted it to. It got canceled prematurely, so we can just kind of start from there, set it a few years after Enterprise, tie in the people that love TOS, but I don't know if I agree with that, because at the same time, there's a lot more people that grew up with TNG, that are the younger demographic audience that they're looking for, that if they would have gone post-Voyager would have been fine. They wouldn't have been restricted with all this history that's already been established.
And what's nice about it is even if we hate the look, we can still say, well, that's just the future. I mean, some people
Yeah.
hate the J, some people hate some of the Star Trek Online ships, but guess what?
Yeah.
It's just future. I mean, there's a bubble of time, and you can say, oh, I don't approve of this. I don't really like the 31st century uniforms overly much. Okay, sure. It's so far in the future, don't worry about it. You know, I've got all my TNG, I've got all my everything there. Now, we say audience, that's half of the... You don't make you shouldn't make content unless you actually want it to be watched. We make Trekyards for you because we think you want to watch it. We make stuff we want to watch, but only if we know the audience is out there for it. We know you guys are hungry to know Discovery, and you interested in our perspective, especially since we know people inside Discovery and all that stuff. And obviously know the previous generations of designers. I mean, we have a great insight into this world.
Yeah.
The J.J. Abrams films, their audience wasn't Star Trek fans. Their audience was summer blockbuster people who say, oh, I've heard of Star Trek, yeah, I'll throw $9, $10, go to the cinema, oh, that was a cool movie, yeah, I've heard of Kirk and Spock, and yeah, they're cool. That's the audience.
Yeah.
We, inside this bubble, which is quite a large bubble, considering how many fan films being made, or what were made, you know, we want it to be made for us, but we are this bubble, but the world is outside the bubble. Everyone else. So if they can get the world on board, it doesn't matter about the Trekkies. Even though we are the ones that got the show, kept the show, got the movies, kept the movies, got 3 spin-offs, got video games. We are the ones that made this a unlike anything else phenomenon. But if a new show can be a really phenomenal show and get new people, then as long as they get their 4 million, 5 million views, I mean, that's a good number. Like Big Bang Theory is like 4 million an episode. If they can get 4 million views an episode, it doesn't matter if 1 million Trekkies hate it. It makes no difference. And those people who are watching it just as part of the Netflix queue, because it's on Netflix, you know, for the rest of Europe, it'll just be another binge show. They'll get the views, they'll get the sponsorship, whatever. It's just another binge show. They're not going to go on forums and look at Trek forum. That's not part of their process.
Yeah.
So a reboot like J.J. Abrams is not for us. This might not be for us either. How do you feel about that? And I'm a bit of a rant there.
In a way, I'm fine with that because it brings in a new audience. But to make a Star Trek show that's not for Trekkies makes no sense. And I know that a lot of people aren't as diehard as, you know, a small percentage of us are.
Like those who run web shows and do it full time.
And watch us full time too as well. Yeah.
Why'd you do it, guys?
Yeah. So not everybody's going to be nitpicky or really give a shit that something looks different or something doesn't fit in. And I think I think Enterprise did it masterfully to attract those new people, not really care a little bit about timeline, but still a few episodes later fix it and say, okay, well, this is why that happened.
And again, it was a long time in the past of the Trek timeline. I mean, I don't see that many issues per se. I mean, obviously you've got some glaring ones, but I mean, meeting a certain race first, these things aren't established. So, you know, there's a lot of leeway there, especially that far beforehand. One interesting thing that I've been wondering the more and more we see about this is that there's 2 big sci-fi franchises, Star Wars and Star Trek. Star Trek went the reboot route, changed look of everything, got young cast members, pissed off a lot of fans, gained some new fans, and at the same time hasn't had longevity. I hear a lot of people saying, you know, I don't care about Interest Darkness, I don't even barely remember it. I mean, people just don't. They're some blockbuster films. That's it. Then you look at The Force Awakens, the Star Wars approach. It is, let's take the original people, tie directly onto the timeline, make everything look mega familiar, using the same designs, but make them more modern a bit, tweak them a bit, refine them a bit, and you know, even the prequel, whatever, and you know, all these things. It's so recognizable. And ironically, J.J. Abrams, same person, on one hand chose to change everything, on one hand chose to keep everything exactly the same.
You know
Guess
why?
What? Why?
Because he was a huge Star Wars fan, so he didn't change the look of the Millennium Falcon at all. He added the square deflector dish or whatever.
He needs a new one anyway.
He wasn't a fan of Star Trek. He even admits to never liking, never understanding, never getting Star Trek.
Yeah.
So why not change it and make it exactly what he wants? And that's what he did. He turned Star Trek into Star Wars. But Star Wars he handled with kid gloves. I'm like, ooh, this is the way it's supposed to be.
And And obviously, I can't just say The Force Awakens will have a bigger place in history. It's the eighth Star Wars, seventh Star Wars. Okay, it has a bigger place in history anyway. But that film is better done than the three, in terms of like continuity and care and attention and love, is better done than the three Star Trek, shows. I probably, Lucas and Disney, they probably, as in Lucasfilm, probably saw the backlash on the J.J. Abrams films and said, yeah, we don't want to change this. They pissed off their audience. Let's do it right. And that's and that is a soft reboot in a sense. It was episode 7 because new characters, new looks for things. It's a soft reboot for the new trilogy. It's a strange one, and it just, again, once they say it's a reboot, I'm like, okay, cool. Let's watch alternate universe Star Trek. Fun. I'll sort of ignore it a bit in the sense of canon because it means nothing. It means nothing.
Yeah.
But I'll be able to enjoy it as a show. As soon as they put the Prime label on, you can scrutinize everything because that is how Star Trek works. That is the universe it's inside. It's so bloody cohesive, it's ridiculous.
Yes. So I guess the point we're trying to make here is we don't have a problem with it being a reboot as long as we're told it's a reboot, which we haven't been yet. But from what we're seeing, it looks very much and feels very much like it is going to be a reboot. And I don't know how I feel about that. I'm not happy. And I want to be happy with this. I want to enjoy it.
I mean, the bottom line is nothing looks like it should for the time period. That sounds like a reboot to me.
Except for the Discovery.
The old Discovery, anyway.
Yes.
And
yes.
it was. But why did I have ball phaser turrets and why did I have glowing?
Are we too picky as Star Trek fans? Maybe that should be the name of this podcast. Are we too picky as Star Trek fans to deserve anything new? Because we just rip it apart.
Okay, I've got to say it, guys, but look at Axanar. Picky Star Trek fans embraced it with so little criticism. It's like, as in the storyline and the characters, it's like a tumbleweed. You can hear one guy distant saying, "It's too much green screen," and that's not a mean thing. So you can clearly do the era right. You can clearly do a reboot. You can clearly do modern TOS right.
Yes.
And fans will love it.
As is evident from In a Mirror Darkly.
I say it soft, and that bridge looked damn good with proper lighting, proper filming.
Yeah.
I mean, now there's one thing that I said very early on to you, and I actually thought this about the other day. I said to you, would it be enough to keep the old TOS look, but change the internals to be modern? So, for example, and would you be able to wrap your head around that? For example, TOS communicator, exactly the same outside. As soon as you open it, touchscreen, panels.
I love it. I love it. That's my idea of a reboot done right. As we talked about.
What if they still call it Prime, though?
It's fine. It's just, this is the modern take on how it should have looked in the 60s when they did it, but they just didn't have the technology.
But why can't you say that about this Discovery? Since they've got all the displays, they've got the costumes, why can't you say that about this?
The costumes, I don't have much of a problem with. I mean, it's a modern take on the original costume. But to change a species, I mean, they did that for the motion picture with the Klingons, which is fine. It ruffled a lot of feathers back then, I suppose. But the Klingons become so established over TNG and stuff in the era that they were doing their best work, and they really made the Klingons something special. To change them now, I don't know. Lots of things I have issues with. Yeah, but I wouldn't have a problem with a TOS style bridge laid out exactly the same kind of flashes, but modernized. You look at the James Cawley sets in Ticonderoga, like displays up top that have little moving things and stats and things zoom in and boop, boop, and it's the old look but modernized. Do that.
I mean, imagine the TOS bridge, but every monitor is literally a touchscreen. But we just never see them touch it, and every monitor can change to be anything else. But it was on screensaver 2 the whole time. It was on standby mode.
Yeah.
and so the bridge can feel very different, but same feel. Maybe you shrink the captain's chair a bit because it's a different ship, make it much thinner, more compact. That's fine. Kirk's chair was bigger, he chose that chair. Whatever. Change jelly beans for full touchscreens. I mean, like you say, it's kind of like the look, but 2017 of that. It's pushing it a bit far. You just say the stories are canon, but the look isn't. But it's for a modern audience, which is a reboot, but only stylistically.
It's a reboot done right, and they've done that over the years. Battlestar Galactica was a reboot done right. They held very true to the original Battlestar Galactica, except for changing Starbuck. But they even called back to the old style Cylons. They
Well, that was the first Cylon War.
Older models, yeah. Same with the Battlestar. The Pegasus looked very much like the original Battlestar Galactica. Those beautiful little tie-ins and nods to the original, without totally obliterating what came before.
The Defender, which is a side ship you see fly around, literally has components from the original Battlestar Galactica, the original TOS-1. We've got the model,
There you go.
and it is the same ship, just modified, and that was the first Cylon warship. So, as far as we know, the ship is canon. Anyway, yeah, wonderful. But then, take BSG for example. Then that was a reboot. Obviously, things they said it was a reboot, so straight away we're defeating our own argument by, if this said reboot, we'll be fine with it. But obviously, different uniforms they had in the new BSG. The Vipers looked quite a lot different, far more real. The internals were completely different. The feel was different. The story was different. Everything was different. Just kept the basic shapes. Well, does not Discovery give a basic shape of an Enterprise? Is the Delta not a basic shape? Is the uniform not a basic style? I mean, but then again, that's like if it's a reboot, that's fine.
Yeah, but exactly. You said that it's a reboot that nods to the original. Whereas this is not a reboot. This is set in prime timeline. So I want to see original Klingons. I want to see rich-headed Klingons. I want to see both of them working together.
And it's like, we'd like the 09 reboot if they fixed some of the biggest problems. Because you can the phase is interesting. The Kelvin's interesting. Okay, the Enterprise is interesting. Don't just get better engineering, less lens flare, a bit more realistic bridge. I mean, there's things you can do to down to earth it a bit more. So. Yeah, I mean, basically, is Discovery a reboot, do you think, Stuart? We just had, 28 minutes discussing. Is Star Trek Discovery a reboot?
I think it is. Whether they intended to do that or not, I'm not sure. It could be a reboot by mistake. Which... the fact that they wouldn't tell their fans that it's a reboot really bothers me. To just say it's prime timeline, to get all our expectations going, okay, well, this is how things are going to look. Bothers me.
Although, again, going back to my argument about not for us, nobody outside of our, 30 million Trek fan circle who love Trek as much as we do, if you said the word prime timeline to my girlfriend's brother, he's going to say, okay.
What?
And they'll see the show, be like, oh yes, Star Trek, cool, whatever that is, okay, that's cool.
Yeah.
The fact that it doesn't mean the thing calling it Prime. If you take away the word Prime, then everybody else on Netflix will just see a cool new Star Trek show. They won't necessarily put two and two together. They won't. If they look at the 60s show, they'll say, oh, that was the one from the 60s. This is the one from 2007. Yeah. And in 2004 they made a Trek show, and it looked advanced. It looked, fancy. They had touchscreens. I mean, that's what they did. They just had big, they had technology then and they have technology now. I mean, why are we making such a big deal out of it? Because, tertiary question. If they don't tell us it's a reboot, but it is, it's Prime, but it isn't, but it is. If it's a really good show, how do we then feel about it being so divergent from what makes sense canonical look-wise? If it's a really good show, how do we feel?
If it's a fantastically awesome show, I have no problem accepting it. I'll have no problem accepting it regardless. I've accepted 2009 as part of Star Trek. And I don't like that very much.
That jellyfish is not a Vulcan design, I'm just saying it. That's not Vulcan.
So yeah, I'll have no problem accepting it just because it's Star Trek, as long as the storytelling's good. Even if the storytelling's shit, it's still going to be Star Trek, and it's still going to be something I watch. But good stories will make it excellent, no matter what.
Excellent.
And that's what I'm hoping for the most, is good storytelling. And I think that might be the saving grace right now. I'm looking forward to seeing more ship designs and how the Federation aspect looks. But to see a more alien race of Klingons is like interesting. Let's make them not look human, because that's what we screwed up that in the 60s. So now we got an opportunity to have a new kind of take on that. Okay, but
the problem is just don't have them be Klingons and then create a new great new villain. Cause,
that's the most ironic thing. They're probably not even Klingons, and we've spent this whole time worrying about it.
Look, they said Klingons. It's not our fault we read the bloody post. We read it. We talked about it. They shouldn't have posted Klingons. Yeah. Yeah, storytelling is the most important thing. I think if the show is really good, I think it's one of those things where if it's so blatantly wrong, fans will just start ignoring the wrongness. Because they have to. I mean, if it doesn't fit, if they're not trying to shoehorn it in, if they're just producing something new, calling it Prime for the sake of marketing, whatever, we'll be like 3 episodes in, the first episode will be like, well, this is disappointing. Second episode will be like, well, I'm watching it because I feel like I'm obligated to. Then episode 3 comes around, oh, that was a good twist, and then we're invested, then we care, and we've sort of stopped caring, like fan films sometimes, like we've stopped caring how this doesn't make sense, or this is a silly bit of technology, we just stop caring about some things, and we enjoy the show. And then at that point, even if they say Prime, I think fans will be clever enough to say, it's not really, we're going to ignore it as part of Trek. I think we as a community are better than to be the same squabbly negativity, I hope anyway, to just say, oh, it ruins everything. It's like, okay, if it's that different, it's not Prime. It doesn't matter what they say. Canon is canon, but if canon itself doesn't work, it can't be canon, Like like we say, the Katinga model used in Enterprise, the third episode, it can't be a Katinga, it just cannot.
Yes.
Even though it's literally a Katinga model. Detail model, I can compare the two in Voyager and DS Enterprise because it's the same ship made literally season 7 of Voyager, season 1 of Enterprise. It's the same bloody ship. I have the bloody file. I know.
Calm yourself.
I know. That always annoys me. So there's some things you can just completely throw out of canon because it just can't work. But if they just said right now, it's a Prime timeline, awesome new reboot, we'd be like, okay, cool. Please make Prime as well. Please. I mean, for God's sake, make us something Star Trek as well.
Yeah.
Makes a TNG miniseries about, the USS Belvedere, a Sovereign class prototype, or the USS Sovereign. There you go. I don't know. Just Star Trek has been so consistent, and most fans love every iteration in some form, and love every era. They're amazing bits of each. We want stories in those timelines. A prequel doesn't have to be a prequel if you're telling a really good story in that part of time, because it always annoyed me when people said this is just a TOS prequel. It's like, no, it's an Enterprise sequel. It just takes place in part of the timeline. If you did a DS9 era, you'd say, oh, it's just a Nemesis prequel. It's like, well, no, it's not. It's a TOS Enterprise TNG sequel. The universe is so broad that you think of a great story that fits there in this tapestry. You tell a great story. It doesn't have to affect everything else, or it could. That's worth it. So I just want Prime as well. I want to be back in that universe. I want to see the TNG aesthetic. It still looked good in Enterprise, the final episode. I mean, that still felt modern and nice and yeah.
Anyway, I guess the point we're trying to get is it could be a reboot. A reboot? Oh my god, I'm Canadian. A reboot.
You are. Good day. No, that's Australian. we don't say good day. What do we say? What do we say as English people? Oh, splendid. Tip top.
Jolly good.
Good fellow. Basically, Stuart, it's a reboot. We got to accept it. I think you guys shall think of it as a reboot from now on. It'll make everything easier. I think that's where my brain is now. Until I see, which I want to believe in them. I really do. Until I see, 3 weeks from now, they're Connie, and it's like, wow, that's the caged Connie, but God, it looks sexy. And they say, yeah, this is somewhere in the background. We're like, okay, cool. Thank you. Basically, we want to see something that links to Prime now. We've seen 7 things that deviate. Can we please see something that is Prime? One thing. That'd be nice. Otherwise, the more we say it's a reboot. I mean, That's where my brain is, and it won't stop
Yeah.
us from debating. Is it the prime nature? Because if they tell us it's prime, boy, are we going to talk about how it doesn't work and fit, because it's interesting, and we're pretty smart with the Star Trek. This is sort of our day. It's my day job. It's your other job. It's good to do. People like hearing about it, and our lives.
My childhood, yeah.
Beautifully said. So I'm sort of rambling now, but it's I think it's a reboot. I think it's a soft prime reboot.
I agree.
Okay.
Anyway, guys,
Question answered. Thumbnail. We answered the question, guys. Moving on.
what do you think it is in the comments below? Tell us. Do you think it's a reboot? Do you hope for a reboot? Do you hope it's some explanation that they're not actually Klingons, perhaps, so we don't have to worry about this so far? But anyway, what do you guys think? If you like the video, please like the video, and don't forget to share it. But yeah, until
and do check in for more Prime Trek on this channel with data files. We get to see these wonderful Prime ships rotating and doing things, and all of our Prime discussion about all the ships from Trek, as we do every week. So this is your home for Prime Trek, guys. So please do jump on, and you can support us, can't you, Stuart?
You can go to Trekyards.com and click the big donate button if you want to do a one-time donation, or we also have our Patreon, which we just almost hit $1,000, guys, which means Fleet Yards episodes will be a regular thing, but that's another thing altogether.
Yes, hopefully. So until next time, guys. Stuart.
I was going to say, but the link for for Patreon is in the description below, so check it out if you can.
Yes. So until next time, guys, I am Commander Klingons.
I'm Captain Foley.
We'll see you next time.
Bye with a rebooted Trekyards. That would be interesting, actually.